From inside the Falcons radio booth at M&T Bank Stadium, it is the Banner Ravens podcast. Paul Mancano and Jonas Shaffer. Jonas wearing your beautiful blue, is that seersucker? What would you call that material?
Touch it.
That doesn't help me determine what it is.
I don't know.
It feels like seersucker, but usually seersucker has blue and white stripes. You look like you're on a boat.
Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, you look great. We are at M&T Bank Stadium to recap the Ravens.
That's the nicest thing you've ever said about me.
That's not true. I've complimented your haircut many times, which looks great. If you're not watching, you should be watching live on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. Listening to us after the fact on any of your favorite podcast platforms. In any case, please give us a like, a thumbs up, subscribe, write us a good review. I'll read it out here on the show. We're going to recap the Ravens' 13-12 preseason win over the Atlanta Falcons. We'll talk about what we saw from the defense. David Ojabo had a nice performance in week 2 of the preseason. We'll also talk, of course, about Josh Johnson running the offense perfectly. But Jonas, first off, what's your word of the day?
My word of the day, Paul, is Josh. It's a verb.
Yep.
That means to chafe or chaff. We don't know. Banter in a teasing way. This was a day for joshing. This was a day for Josh Johnson. We don't have a good word of the day, Paul.
I looked up the language of origin. It just says an Americanism dating back to 1835 to 1845 of obscure origin. That means somebody in between 1835 and 1845 was saying, I'm just joshing at some point during that. Before the Civil War, people were using that term.
Do you think it was named at the expense of someone or at the honor?
There had to have been someone? A guy named Josh.
First name or last name?
It's a great question. It was Joshua. So was it a popular name back then? Who's to say?
Probably. Joshua
Chamberlain. Is that somebody?
Joshua Chamberlain?
Is that somebody?
Are you just throwing out names from your AP from AP US history textbook?
Also to chaff. What does that even mean? That was in the definition. CHAFF. I mean, I know joshing means to joke. Also, where does Josh Wine fit in all this? Joshua Chamberlain, that's right. He was a general for the
how about that?
For the North in the Civil War. He was big in the Battle of Gettysburg as well. Had a legendary mustache. So maybe
he is best known for his gallantry at the Battle of Gettysburg.
Our word of the day: gallantry.
I hope that is inscribed on my tombstone. Gallant Jonas Shaffer.
Not a chance. Jonas, what do you think of Josh Johnson today? Nice bounce back performance against the Falcons after he had a so-so debut in the preseason against the Eagles. He goes 11 for 11 in the first half today.
Yeah, I think it would probably be more compelling podcasting if we had Kyle Goon on to talk about
about the stuff we don't have on the podcast.
To talk about how he doesn't feel like Josh Johnson is good enough to be the Ravens' backup quarterback. And I guess my feeling is Josh Johnson did enough to at least allay some of those fears for a week. I imagine that this past week was a busy one for Josh Johnson discussion on Sports Talk Radio. I imagine we'll probably see if the Packers do what a lot of teams do around the league, which is ramp up their starters. And assuming that we do not get Lamar Jackson against the Packers, then, Josh Johnson versus Green Bay next Saturday could probably be a pretty good litmus test for where exactly, he is in this command of the offense, because I agree. The week 1 Josh Johnson that we saw was a wildly different version from the one we saw in week 2. Maybe some of that you can chalk up to a better performance from the pass protection unit, but he made some good throws. There was the downfield strike to Keith Kirkwood, on the out route near the left sideline. That was really impressive. There was the 3rd and long throw to Tylan Wallace, where he's running a post route or some kind of deep post where he just hits him in stride, leads him in front of the safety who had no clue how to kind of close on the angle. And then obviously not a tremendously high degree of difficulty throw, but just the nice little check down to Owen Wright that leads to the touchdown and lets him take care of business. And I think him executing well in high leverage spots was something that he did not do last week especially well. And I mean, the stats kind of speaks for itself. I mean, 11 for 11, over 100 yards passing. Probably should have had 2 scoring drives if not for a truly terrible snap by Ben Cleveland. And we didn't really get a full explanation for what happened on there. John Harbaugh said it was unfortunate, and he acknowledged that was a euphemism. But it was interesting that there were guys on the right side of that line who reacted to whatever it was as well. So, I wasn't in on the media huddle for Josh Johnson, but I imagine he had to be pretty confident about how he came out of this one, considering just how rough that one was last week.
I mean, Josh Johnson's 37, so the book is out on who he is as a player. I don't know if one preseason game changes our view of him overall, but it certainly showed he had a good command of the offense going up against, Atlanta's defense, which was poor in the regular season last year, is expected to be poor again this year, and probably mostly backups out there again today. But he was also throwing to a lot of backups as well, throwing to Tylan Wallace, throwing to Keith Kirkwood. So it's not like he had a complementary of weapons out there as well to throw to. I don't know if one preseason performance should change our minds one way or the other about who Josh Johnson is as a quarterback and whether he's good enough to be QB2. I thought it was funny because on the other side, Taylor Heineke started for Atlanta and frankly could have been, jokingly, we said before the game, auditioning for the role of the Ravens backup because they have Kirk Cousins and they have Michael Penix in Atlanta. So would they really want to keep somebody who's pretty experienced as an NFL quarterback as their QB3? And if somebody like Taylor Heineke becomes available, would the Ravens go out and get him? Maybe a game like this from Josh Johnson assuages the Ravens' fears of his ability to step in. However, I don't know if we should over-index this one performance from a 37-year-old who has already put out a body of work over the course of his decade-plus career.
Yeah, and 8 for 16 for Heineke, 114 yards, and I think a lot of those were just kind of layup long throws where the Ravens just didn't do a good job in their secondary. So I think of the two starting quarterbacks today, I think Josh Johnson was definitely the more impressive one. I don't know enough about the Falcons starters who were or were not available today to make a comprehensive judgment of just what kind of stuff Tyler Heineke was working with. But listen, I mean, I don't think that this is the kind of performance from Josh Johnson that you can be unhappy about in any kind of way. He did what he had to. This was in a lot of ways, it kind of reminded me of Tyler Huntley during, his heyday here. When he had a heyday, it was taking care of the ball. It was doing a good enough job of kind of making something out of nothing. He doesn't have Tyler Huntley's wheels. No quarterbacks on this roster besides Lamar Jackson have anyone. I mean, I guess Emory Jones in college was something of a dual threat, but that this was the kind of performance that makes you want to be a believer in Josh Johnson again. And I'm sure if the Ravens had their druthers, this would have been a performance you kind of preserve for the final week of the preseason. Maybe we get it during the final week of the preseason, but again, this was, close to perfect passer rating, 142.4. That's pretty dang good.
Yeah, he can scramble a little bit as well. And you mentioned Emory Jones. We saw Emory Jones a lot in the third quarter of this game. Devin Leary came in for the final drive of the first half.
Very strange.
Very odd. Then went back to the bench, then came back out for the fourth quarter. Maybe the Ravens were trying to get Devin Leary to throw a bomb at the end of the first half because they got the ball back with under a minute in their own territory.
They could have. I mean, it was 7 seconds left on that fourth and long. Just if you're worried about him, taking, or if you're worried about that play going too quickly and then leaving the Falcons with possession at like the minus 40-yard line, then just have them roll out and throw a long bomb. Right. It was just a very strange decision. If I guess you probably value more the opportunity to have a situational punt there, because how many times are you going to have Devin Leary or any of the wide receivers who would have been on the field for that play actually be on the field for a Hail Mary, but still give the 30 or 40,000 fans here something to root for.
Yeah,
Hail Marys rock.
No,
situational punts do not rock.
What did you think of the way that they deployed Devin Leary, and do you think it could have been an attempt by the Ravens to try to hide the 6th round rookie so that when he is eventually likely placed on the practice squad, he isn't claimed by another team?
When he's ultimately released,
and then
I mean,
hopefully signed to the practice squad.
Can you recall an instance of a guy going in for a full drive, being taken out and then coming back in at the end?
No, but I also can't recall a time when a quarterback has been thrown in for the very final possession and then commits a strip sack fumble that allows the other team to take the possession and win the game, like we saw last week where Emory Jones lost the game for the Ravens. So we've seen some weird quarterbacks decisions in the last couple weeks.
That's true. That's true. Emory Jones, to his credit, 7 for 9, 100 yards, 1 touchdown. The long pass that he had to Dayton Wade, very reminiscent. I think the Ravens coaches definitely have a favorite play in preseason. If you want a nice chunk play and you don't have faith that the defense is any good, just call the double move,
Yeah.
the stop and go.
Beautiful.
It was a nice route by Dayton Wade, but also very much the kind of route that I would run in middle school to get open against some over aggressive DBs. Just the old pump and go.
Yeah.
The old stop and go works 100% of the time, 60% of the time.
Yeah.
But, again, to Devin Leary, the point of Devin Leary, not very impressive last week. I imagine that maybe some people in the Ravens front office don't feel especially let down by that, because if he only had like the 50% completion percentage last year, this year just 5 passes total, 3 for 5 for 24 yards. It's not like a lot of NFL GMs around the league right now are going to be pointing to Devin Leary and saying, boy, we sure would love to have him on our 53. We sure would love to have him as our definite quarterback 3. So, I know that there was a lot of faith to invest a 6th round pick in him. It's not a huge amount of draft capital, but considering who else was available at that time, it was definitely a bit of a risk. And I think right now probably the Ravens are tracking to have him be a practice squad candidate, because I don't think anything that he's shown either in training camp or in the preseason would suggest that he is a legitimate guy to have on a week 1 roster.
Did you like him less or more than the guy that the Falcons trotted out at the quarterback out of Illinois for the second half of this game, whose name has already gone out of my brain?
Josh Paddock, I think
No, John Paddock?
Jim Paddock?
Somebody Paddock.
Let me look it up.
But who'd you like better? Definitely not Jim Paddock.
I like my quarterbacks with a little bit of mobility. Probably not going to see a lot of Devin Leary running read options, which you can do with Jay Paddock. But yeah, I mean they're both kind of replacement level.
Yeah.
Preseason quarterbacks. I don't really feel too strongly about either.
Maybe the Ravens, and this is just a take that I'm working on now. We're thinking with bringing in Emory Jones last week in the final play, bringing in Devin Leary, John Paddock. Yeah, that was right. Bringing in Devin Leary right at the end of the first half is maybe they're thinking, look, if you're a backup quarterback, you're going to be thrown into a lot of situations. Not too many times are you thrown into a clean situation where you get to prepare all week and then start the game. Sometimes quarterback goes down in the middle of the game and you have to step up in an important drive and all of a sudden come on cold off the bench and deliver. So maybe that's what they're thinking.
Right.
I don't know exactly. All right.
And we should also say, and maybe this is where you're going to take us, but even more impressive performances all around from this, Ravens quarterback group, considering the running game.
Yeah.
Again, led very, very little. Obviously John Harbaugh got asked about the offensive line's performance post game, said fairly that they couldn't really decipher, couldn't really divine too much from the performance until he looked at the tape. Totally fine. We can't really get a good sense of who's missing on what.
But it was not divine.
It was definitely not divine. I will say one of my favorite stats to look at is just, average yards before contact per carry. Last year, the Ravens, I think, finished 3rd in the NFL, close to 2 yards per contact per carry. A big part of that is just the gravitational pull of having Lamar. You're always going to have, especially if he's involved in the running game, you're always going to have, that linebacker or that edge defender or that conflict defender. In some respects, it's going to be having his eyes on Lamar, which obviously helps with the math of a general play. But, through 2 weeks, the Ravens are down to 1.1 yards before contact per carry, which is bottom half of the league, bottom 10 in the league. It's not a great showing so far, considering they are probably going with 3 projected week 1 starters. I mean, we saw Daniel Voorhees, who gave up a sack that was pretty clean out there again. Daniel Falele went the entire first half. Roger Rosengarten, who it seems John Harbaugh said that they would ramp up his workload. They definitely did ramp up his workload. He was out there for all of the first half. So not a great showing, but again, I think you think back to a lot of these preseasons where the Ravens have not had great push up front. And I guess you just kind of hang your hat on that hope that once it's week one, once you have Lamar there, once you have Derrick Henry there, once you have Todd Monken calling his A+ stuff, then the struggles that the Ravens have had establishing the line of scrimmage. I mean, Christ, they had to go from a 3rd and 1 run fail to a 4th and 2 conversion from Josh Johnson to I think it was Dayton Wade or Malik Cunningham on the sideline there, because they couldn't do a good job of getting a simple yard. I think they went backwards, which is just not something you ever really expect to see from a Ravens run game during the regular season.
Yeah, no Rasheen Ali. He's still dealing with that stinger from last week. So we saw Chris Collier, Owen Wright. Collier went 12 carries for 29 yards, Wright 8 carries for 9 yards. Never a good ratio there. The starting line offensively group for the Ravens to start this game. It was Josh Jones at left tackle, Andrew Voorhees at left guard, Patrick McCary at center, Daniel Falele at right guard, and Roger Rosengarten at right tackle. And I was curious as to why they had Patrick McCary at center and not Ben Cleveland. And then maybe we saw with that horrendous snap that you mentioned, Jonas, in the first half from Ben Cleveland at center.
Yeah, I mean, that was really the first real misstep from him in all the snaps that we've seen from him in training camp, in certainly that preseason game last week. So it was not to make an excuse for Ben Cleveland, but that was a situation where, if I recall correctly, I think the Ravens were trying to go tempo.
Yeah.
Trying to go hurry up. That was something that they did really a great job last year under Todd Monken. That was not something you ever saw under Greg Roman. Definitely an advantage when it works well, but it didn't on this one. And the Ravens lose a pretty good shot at scoring on that one.
They had 2 guys in motion at the time. I get it. It's confusing, but it's funny because John Harbaugh said last week after the preseason opener against the Eagles, he said,
maybe he's the center.
Maybe Ben Cleveland's the center. Well, maybe he's not. Maybe you don't want to have him in that situation. In terms of what you saw from the wideouts, you obviously did not see Zay Flowers. You didn't see Rashad Bateman. You didn't see Nelson Aguilar. You saw a little bit of Anthony Miller, who they signed recently, the 29-year-old who had made his last appearance in an NFL game on offense in 2021. So it's been a long time. And back then he had just 6 catches for 25 yards with Houston and Pittsburgh after 3 pretty productive seasons to start his career in Chicago. Is Anthony Miller in this conversation? Where does, Russell Gage, who we have barely seen and was not, I don't think he was out there today. Where does he fit into this conversation? Tylan Wallace. How many wide receivers do you expect the Ravens to keep? And did you learn anything about this competition today?
Not really. Devontae Walker was healthy enough to get dressed for this game, but I asked John Harbaugh post game, "What's the deal with no snaps for Devontae Walker?"
You did your Seinfeld voice too, which was odd.
He loves that. Still dealing with a rib injury, according to John Harbaugh. That was something that he's dealt with throughout the preseason. Obviously, if you've ever been punched hard in the midsection, or just I shouldn't have said punched. If you've ever been hit hard in the midsection, it makes it tough to run.
I think if you did your Seinfeld impression to John Harbaugh, he would have been justified in delivering you a rib shot.
Yeah. I don't know if he ran any routes. Just, I shared with you the PFF breakdown. I don't think they had him as recording a single route run. Maybe there was one route run during the entirety of this game. So, again, really tough to make an evaluation of him after what was already a tough week 1 for him with, like 16 plays total or something like that. Maybe 7 or 8 routes run, 0 in this one. But again, I think it's pretty safe to say that his roster spot is secure.
Yeah.
You're just going to have to deal with probably like a bit of a less than ideal training camp, because we're past the part of camp where fans are there. We just have 2 more practices probably that are open to us. The 1 joint practice on Thursday against the Packers. You hope that he is good to go for and hopefully good to go for a significant chunk of time against the Packers on next Saturday's game. But again, not really elevating a whole lot of hopes and dreams and confidence that he could be a legitimate wide receiver 4 by the start of the season. But who knows? Who knows? Russell Gage, haven't seen him in practice, so I assume that he's banged up. No one asked about him post game, but again, he definitely has a longer track record, a deeper track record than Tylan Wallace. He's also coming back from the torn patellar tendon that completely wiped out his 2023 season with the Bucks. And then Anthony Miller, I'm still kind of iffy on him being a serious, credible threat to make this season opening roster. As you said, he hasn't really done anything for the past couple of years. Not a single NFL catch until 2021. Yes, he's had some nice catches in training camp, but some of them were like the cornerback didn't really make that credible of an effort, just wanting to kind of give these guys the space and not risk, really something bad happening as they go up for the catch point. So if fans are falling in love with him, I get it. But again, not a huge game for him today. 3 catches for 16 yards total. So I still think he's pretty firmly on the outside looking in. So I guess I would say that Tylan Wallace and Deontay Hardy are probably the last guys making that team, but don't feel like either is going to make that much of an impact as a wide receiver still this year.
Yeah, we saw Deontay Hardy back for the kickoffs a couple times.
Not great on kickoffs, but at least he showed some juice on punt returns.
Yeah, he made a couple guys miss on a punt return, but he ranged all the way over from the far side of the field to the near side to grab one of the kick returns. There were 2 guys back there for a reason. The hope is that one of those 2 guys can take it. I can't remember who he kind of took that ball from. It might have been Owen Wright. Snatched it and then took it all the way up to the 19-yard line. So not a great return there. Let's talk about the defense, because we saw David Ojabo have a strong performance. He was displaying a spin move. He was creating some pressure. He looked pretty good to my eye in the run game. This was a much needed performance for a guy that was not cleared to play in preseason week 1 against the Eagles, that you have expressed concern with when he has been on the field, both on the practice field and at the beginning of last season. How good was he today in your estimation?
I mean, really impressive. I would like to see the all-22 so I can get a better sense of just what he was doing well. But I thought it was, admittedly pretty disappointing to me to see that first, I think 3rd and long snap from the Falcons when they were backed up in their own end, because it was exactly the kind of scenario that you would imagine him kind of pinning his ears back and getting after the passer. And then you see Trent Simpson be the one to blitz from the other side as David Ojabo drops into coverage. And that was the play that ended up with Jalen Arbor-Davis having the nice pass defense on that, kind of 3rd and long in breaking route that ultimately goes incomplete. But there was I think a screen pass to the right side where it looked like he was able to kind of turn the corner on the left tackle. There was obviously the play that I think ends up with the Trent Simpson pass breakup, where he's able to kind of turn the corner, show that nice bend that made him such a really impressive prospect coming out of Michigan. And then just the spin move, just a very nice, clean move. And I think what's most impressive about basically all of these is, you certainly need a threshold of athleticism for those moves to be viable, but he's winning with his hands. He's not just turning and burning.
Right.
He is winning at the point of contact. He's showing the technical ability that he showed, I think, in spades, or at least he showed a functional level of technical ability at Michigan. But people wondered, would he have the counter? Would he have, the ability to kind of know what to do when offensive tackles would take away his first and his second move? And, I'm not going to go out there and say that he's going to be in store for a 6 to 8 sack season, but if he can just be a guy who is credible as an edge setter, and I think he showed, he's definitely shown improvement from his first 2 years. And then can he be in the mix when, let's say David, Dafe Owe rolls an ankle, or maybe Kyle Van Noy is going through some stuff. And I mean, I think I've probably seen more from him than I have from Tavius Robinson, over these first 2 games.
Who's been everybody's camp crush this summer.
Yeah. So I just think that if you consider that there's probably not all of the rust knocked off of him, and probably he has more to go in terms of just getting back to where he could be at his optimal levels, I don't know how you don't feel really, really encouraged coming away from this game.
You just need to see him healthy. That's still by far the most important thing for him is he has to get through the season healthy, at least much more than he has his first 2 NFL seasons. Adisa Isaac, we saw a little bit of action from. He came on a totally unblocked on and pressured the quarterback, whose name already has escaped me again. John Paddock. In the fourth quarter, at one point, he did leave with an injury. He went to the medical tent. Did John Harbaugh give you any update post game?
Sounds like that was just basically simple cramping.
Okay.
So that's something that obviously he is still ramping up conditioning wise. Just the late start after the prolonged and recurring hamstring injuries. That is obviously something that on a day like today, the humidity being what it is, obviously we're here a nicely air conditioned press box, but I guess John Harbaugh saying that not exactly a spot that you want to be if you're a less than fully conditioned guy. So we still have the 2+ weeks for him to get in full strength if he is going to be on that 46-man game day roster come week 1. Impressive for him to be a good tackler in the run game. You see him crash from the backside a couple of times on some of those runs to limit big gains. So again, I think every time John Harbaugh talks about him, he speaks admiringly of just the kind of size and strength that he has. I don't know if he's going to be super involved in the pass rush early on, but if he can just be a guy that you feel confident throwing out there for a snap or two, I think that would definitely be a win, considering there was a point where we were all kind of tugging our collars, wondering, is Adisa Isaac actually going to be a potential factor for this team early in the season if he can't get on the field for OTAs, for minicamp, for early in training camp. He's had a pretty nice showing, all things considered.
Safety Bo Braid, Maryland's own, had some nice plays today as well. Almost had that interception that ended up hitting the ground. He was flagged, I think, in the end zone.
Pretty flagrant hold.
The final drive.
You can't be tackling guys in the end zone.
No.
But I guess it sure beats the alternative.
He does have an uphill battle, I think you could say, to make this roster, because you have pretty set situation at safety right now with Ardarius Washington and Eddie Jackson factoring in as your third, fourth safeties there. Do you think there's any chance he makes the roster? Was there anybody else that flashed to you on defense, Jonas?
Not really. It was kind of an unremarkable second half. I think in a lot of ways for
unremarkable game. I think
that's the preseason.
Unremarkable preseason.
I think the further and further we get from that Ravens preseason winning streak, you realize that the only thing that was notable in the macro sense was just the fact that they had a long preseason winning streak, because these guys are working hard, they're trying their best, but darn it, they are probably not NFL quality for a reason.
There's not a lot of flash. I don't think have we seen a single interception between either team in the first 2 preseason games, between the Eagles, the Ravens, and now the Falcons? I can't think of one. We've barely seen any sacks.
I don't think we have.
The Emory Jones deep touchdown, 56-yard touchdown, was the most exciting play, I think you could say, of the preseason.
There wasn't looking at the stats right now, there wasn't a single interception last week either.
So it's not even like we're seeing the defenses flash, even though we've seen some pretty porous offensive performances.
Yep, that's preseason for you. Not a whole lot of glitz, not a whole lot of glamour, but Bo Braid at least has been fun to watch. He's been like a missile out there. Obviously, the as you said, the penalty was not a great look for him. Probably going to hurt his old PFF score, but it would have been nice to see Sanusi Kane. But obviously, he's still dealing with the stinger from that big hit that he administered in the first week of the preseason. So I still think it's probably unlikely that either of those guys is on the inside looking out. I think both those guys are probably in a tough spot right now to make the roster, especially with the Eddie Jackson signing. Again, he wasn't really thrown at a whole lot. Tough to really have a good sense for how many of those deep completions on those play action passes were his fault until we get a good sense for exactly what the film shows. But I thought Ardarius Washington had a nice showing, at least as a run defender. I think he came up and had a pretty aggressive move to cut down a running back after like a 1 or 2 yard gain from the slot. Again, you just want to continue to show him He had that nice tackle in the open field after another one of those play action bootlegs. So again, he's done nothing in my eyes to kind of hurt his to help his stock, done nothing to hurt his stock. Excuse me.
I'll tell you whose seat is getting really warm. Justin Tucker, trying that whatever the heck that was on that kickoff, missing the landing zone and kicking it.
That's rule one.
Get it in the landing zone.
Get it in the landing zone.
Yeah, but it's the same as that's rule one. Kick it inbounds for a regular kickoff before this season, and the result is the same. If you don't get it in the landing zone, just like if you kicked it out of bounds, it ball ends up at the 40-yard line.
Yeah, but it's the preseason.
Yeah, he's trying it. I like it. I can see the gears turning. He's going to try some funky things.
Try stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Jonas, the next preseason game, the last preseason game, is next Saturday at 1:00 at Lambeau Field. We will have, at the very latest, a podcast then, a post-game podcast on the Banner Ravens podcast for that. In the meantime, you have an article coming out later on the BaltimoreBanner.com where you can subscribe $1 for 6 months. Gianna Hahn already has her stock up, stock down report. Kyle Goon is going to have something soon as well on the BaltimoreBanner.com. And any final thoughts before we get out of here on your seersucker?
I guess we should send our thoughts and prayers to Joe D.
Sure.
Ravens offensive line coach, dealing with some complications, according to John Harbaugh, from some offseason surgery that he's dealt with. Obviously, we got a chance to talk to Daniel Failele in the post-game locker room today. We asked him about George Warhop, the replacement offensive line coach, the kind of the new guy who's stepping in for Joe D. Obviously, goes back, I think, with Todd Monken a few years, a guy who's been around the block a good bit. The Ravens obviously have great experience, I think, at that offensive line coaching position, with Travell Wharton being a former offensive line coach himself, coming over from the Washington Commanders after last year. So, we asked Failele about him. He said not really too much of a difference from what Joe D was coaching him. So at least you have that consistency in lessons, consistency in emphasis for what he is teaching these guys. Obviously, it was always going to be, if this offensive line is not good in this season, you can't really argue counterfactual. So you can't really say, oh, Joe D would have fixed it, because he was dealing with the same issues that this new reconstituted coaching staff is dealing with. But it's just, you wish that Joe D is making a quick recovery. You hope that he is back at some point during the season. But it's just a tough situation all around for the Ravens, for the new guys, for the old guys. I don't know what else to say besides, we're thinking of you, Joe D, and I hope that he's able to get back in full strength by no time.
Absolutely. And we also are glad that Mark Andrews is fine after the car accident that he got into last week driving to the facility. John Harbaugh and Mark Andrews both expressing the sentiment of wear your seatbelt, which is a good one to express as well. And this is not to do with this accident, but just a general PSA, that because there was no, this is totally unrelated. Don't text and drive. The amount of times I see people texting and driving, this is totally off topic. I'm ranting about it, but it just bothers the heck out of me. And just be safe, guys. Just be safe. And reminders, like, you hate to see reminders when, a famous football player gets in a car accident, but car accidents happen way more frequently than you'd think. And don't be the stupid person who causes one because you're not paying attention.
Wow.
That's what I had to say.
Already firing shots at Rashee Rice, huh?
We're done with this. All right. At Jonas_Shaffer is his Twitter handle. I'm at Paul Mancano, at All Banner Sports, of course. Thanks so much for tuning in. We will have another podcast coming for you soon. In the meantime, like, rate, review, subscribe, all that good stuff to the Banner Ravens podcast. For Jonas Shaffer, I'm Paul Mancano. We'll catch you next time.